Hey guys, today we'll be covering a 2019 romance series called Coffee and Vanilla. The opening scene features a beautiful young woman named Risa Shiroki, who has never been in a relationship. Due to her charm, a lot of boys express their desire to be with her. However, she always rejects them due to her nervousness. One day, Risa is in a coffee shop when she is approached by a random guy who asks her out. She, as usual, pretends to have other plans and decides to walk away. But this time, the guy grabs her hand and demands her phone number. Just then, a handsome man named Hiroto Fukami steps in to help her out. Hiroto pretends to be her boyfriend and escorts her away from the other guy. Once they get a bit further away, Risa thanks him for helping her get rid of the guy. Seeing his well-mannered demeanor, she is somewhat surprised and smitten by him. So when Hiroto asks her out on a date that evening, she immediately agrees. In the next scene, the two go out for dinner, and Risa appears nervous as it is her first date. However, after a few drinks, she relaxes and starts talking more confidently. However, before their night can end, Risa becomes so drunk that she falls asleep on the table. The next morning, she wakes up in Hiroto's place, embarrassed. She then approaches him and apologizes for the previous night. Hiroto forgives her right away and prepares coffee for the both of them. While they are drinking, Hiroto realizes that he has dropped his tie-pin somewhere, and so they both start looking for it. Soon after, Risa finds it and proceeds to hand it over, but in the process, she bumps into him. This causes both of them to fall on the sofa, with Hiroto on top of her. Things get really heated up and Hiroto gets ready to kiss her. But right then, an alarm sound interrupts him. After this, he gets up and apologizes to her for making things awkward. He also admits to having fallen for her since their first meeting and finally asks her out. Risa is perplexed for a moment, but she decides to accept his proposal. He then hugs and kisses her, claiming that he has never felt this way about anyone else. In the next scene, we see Risa in a coffee shop talking to her best friend, Nachan, over the phone. She shares everything about her new boyfriend, but instead of congratulating her, Nachan suggests that she be cautious, as boys are notorious for playing with others' feelings. After a while, Risa hesitantly calls Hiroto to check if he is available the following day. However, she immediately hangs up when she hears another female's voice on the phone. Risa then recalls her best friend's words and gets worried that Hiroto will dump her. Later, she is walking down the street when Hiroto hugs her from behind and admits that he couldn't resist meeting her after hearing her voice on the phone. He also lets her know that he has taken the day off and invites her to his place. At night, they sit by the window and watch the rain. Hiroto admits that he dislikes rainy days, but he doesn't mind it when he's with Risa. Their casual conversation eventually turns romantic, and the two end up making love in bed. At midnight, Risa awakens and overhears Hiroto on the phone talking about her, prompting her to get worried. The next morning, Hiroto prepares a breakfast for her, which appears to be delicious. However, Risa is still disturbed by last night's incident, so she wants to question him about it. But at the last moment, she decides not to, afraid that she will offend him. Later, Hiroto takes her shopping where he selects a hat for her. In the midst of everything, he looks at her and inquires if she has something to ask. Hesitantly, Risa asks about his profession, but he doesn't reveal it, claiming she will find out soon. One rainy day, Hiroto and Risa are walking down the street when they notice a small, happy family. As Risa starts imagining herself with children, Hiroto pulls out a ring and places it on her ring finger, admitting that he has grown possessive of her. Risa is very happy and says she will treasure this day for the rest of her life. The next day, Risa is at school and she is constantly looking at her ring. A few moments later, her classmate Yoshiki approaches her and asks if the ring is from her boyfriend. When she responds with a yes, Yoshiki inquires about his profession. Risa doesn't know, so she pretends he is a salesman. Their conversation is interrupted when a professor enters and introduces the special guest lecturer, who is the CEO of Fukami Holdings. Risa is astounded to learn that it is none other than Hiroto. Meanwhile, Yoshiki notices her reaction and understands the truth. After class, as Risa is heading out, Hiroto pulls her into a room. He then inquires about Yoshiki, clearly jealous, but Risa insists that there is nothing between them. Hearing this, he calms down and starts kissing her. Unfortunately, they are caught in the act by Yoshiki, who is lurking in the corner. The following day, Yoshiki approaches Risa in class and learns she is trying to improve her cooking skills. He then invites her to the restaurant where he is a part-timer, and the latter happily agrees. Upon reaching there, Yoshiki teaches her how to cook, and the two have a lot of fun. In the midst of all of this, Risa receives multiple calls from Hiroto, but she doesn't notice it. Afterwards, the two of them return, and as they walk, Yoshiki confesses his feelings for her. Risa is taken aback by the sudden confession and is unable to come up with a reply. Shortly after, Hiroto approaches them and proceeds to take Risa with him. However, before departing, Yoshiki warns him that he isn't going to give up on Risa so easily. In the next scene, we see Risa having ice cream at Hiroto's place. She promises him that she will firmly turn down Yoshiki the next day because there is nothing between them. Hiroto then begins kissing her, and the two have some private time together. As promised, Risa approaches Yoshiki the next day and expresses her undying love for Hiroto. The latter is heartbroken, and when he notices a love bite on Risa's neck, he gets angry. He then comes close to her and asks if he can be mean to her one last time. The very next second, he pinches her neck, causing her love bite to become darker. As he is walking out, he comes across Hiroto. Yoshiki tries to pretend that he kissed Risa and gave her a love bite, but Hiroto doesn't fall for it. Regardless, he is still hopeful of having Risa, so he warns Hiroto and departs. The next day, Hiroto takes Risa to a new restaurant called Cafe Vanilla, which is tranquil and calm. Risa is very impressed because she likes peaceful places like this one. To her surprise, Hiroto reveals that he is the owner of the restaurant and that he opened it for Risa. He then offers her a coffee vanilla ice cream and asks if she remembers anything. The scene then cuts to a flashback to when Hiroto used to work in a coffee shop. He met Risa for the first time there and noticed she didn't like black coffee. Seeing this, he served her the same coffee vanilla ice cream. Hiroto claims to have been in love with Risa since that time. Hearing this, Risa appreciates his efforts and promises that she will never leave him. After some time, the two of them leave the restaurant, only to meet Hiroto's rival company's CEO, Takaaki Akutsu. Akutsu approaches them and mocks Hiroto for opening a cafe solely for a girl. However, the latter dismisses him and walks away with his girlfriend. The next day, Risa is on her way home from school when Hiroto's secretary, Yuki, arrives to pick her up. When they reach Hiroto's place, he invites her to the opening ceremony of Cafe Vanilla. However, Risa hesitates as she isn't properly dressed for the party. Hiroto simply smiles and leads her to a room containing several designer clothes and everything else that she requires. A few moments later, Risa tries on a red one, which Hiroto finds really lovely. He then asks Yuki to leave them alone for a moment. It appears that Hiroto couldn't resist hugging her, so as soon as his assistant leaves, Hiroto pulls her into his arms. Later, the two attend a party where Hiroto introduces her as his better half. This makes Risa very nervous, and she wonders if it's a good idea to reveal their relationship. Hiroto responds that he wants everyone to be aware of them. Risa is overjoyed to hear this, and grateful to have such a loving partner. A few moments later, she heads to the restroom where she accidentally bumps into some girls and breaks her heel. This deeply bothers her, and she starts hesitating on whether to return back to the party. Just then, Akutsu, who is also attending the event, approaches her and assists her with her heel. Risa appreciates him for his assistance, but Akutsu won't let her go. He decides to reveal everything about Hiroto's past because she is in his grasp now. However, Risa refuses to hear it, stating that she will wait until Hiroto tells it himself. She then proceeds to leave, but Akutsu pulls her back and forcibly attempts to kiss her. Fortunately, Hiroto arrives in the nick of time and rescues her. After Akutsu leaves, he apologizes for leaving her alone, but promises that it won't happen again. Hiroto also tells her that he doesn't want to talk about his past because it was chaotic and he did many unreasonable things. Risa understands his reluctance, and soon they share a soulful kiss, healing everything between them. Soon after, Yuki summons Hiroto for the opening ceremony. He walks towards the event, but before commencing his speech, he tells Yuki to be with Risa. He also reveals that he has planned something against Akutsu. Risa, who is nearby, overhears their conversation. The series then cuts to a week where Risa is seen walking through the streets. For 7 days, she hasn't seen Hiroto, and as a result, negative thoughts have started running through her mind. In the evening, she finally spots him and becomes happy. However, her happiness is short-lived because another girl approaches Hiroto and the two drive away. Risa is heartbroken to witness this as she believes Hiroto has dumped her. Later, as she wanders around the streets dejected, Akutsu approaches her and hands her a souvenir. Risa obviously won't take it, so Akutsu deduces that her boyfriend has dumped her. He then goes on to reveal that Hiroto has always been the same and that he doesn't take anyone seriously. During their conversation, Akutsu receives a call from his office informing him that something bad has happened. When Risa inquires about the matter, he tells her to read the news and rushes away. Just as she pulls out her phone, Hiroto arrives and hugs her from behind. Later that night, Risa and Hiroto are at the latter's place when she finally goes through the news. To her surprise, she discovers that the girl Hiroto met earlier is the president of a company with whom he has just signed a business contract. As a result, Risa regrets suspecting him and starts apologizing profusely. She also tells him about what Akutsu told her about him. Hearing this, Hiroto admits that he didn't take anyone seriously and that it's because he's only concerned with expanding his business. However, from the day he met Risa, he's changed. At midnight, Akutsu calls Hiroto and asks him why he mixed his personal and professional lives. Akutsu's business appears to have suffered a significant loss after Hiroto signed the contract previously. However, the latter couldn't care less, and he simply hangs up the phone. Enraged, Akutsu calls his secretary and orders him to bring Risa to him, regardless of the circumstances. In the next scene, Risa's best friend Nate-chan is walking down the street when she bumps into Hiroto. Surprisingly, as soon as she sees him, she becomes instantly smitten. Elsewhere, we see that Risa has been hired as a model for Akutsu's new coffee shop. However, since it's her first time, she is unable to strike good poses. After a while, Akutsu calls her personally and tells her to act as if the food is delicious. He also pulls her close and claims that the job was just an excuse because he really wants her. A little while later, a disguised Yuki arrives and manages to send Akutsu away. He then reveals himself to Risa, claiming that Hiroto sent him to look after her. Unfortunately, Akutsu returns and catches them talking. Angry, he takes part in the photo shoot as Risa's boyfriend, making her extremely uncomfortable. Just then, Hiroto arrives and takes Akutsu's place. Risa now appears to be content, and as a result, the photo shoot goes well. Afterwards, Risa is at Hiroto's place when she receives a phone call from Nate-chan, telling her that she has fallen in love at first sight. Risa is happy for her best friend, oblivious that the guy she saw is none other than her own lover. The next day, Risa meets Nate-chan at a coffee shop and they talk over a drink. Suddenly, Nate-chan notices her crush Hiroto standing outside. She informs her best friend about it, and when Risa turns around, she is taken aback. Fortunately, before things can get awkward, she clarifies that Hiroto is her boyfriend. Nate-chan is obviously upset, but she simply laughs it off. Later that night, Nate-chan is at Risa's place for a sleepover. After chatting for a while, she goes for a shower while Risa gets busy on the phone with Hiroto. At the same time, someone arrives at the door. It is none other than Hiroto himself. He has come to surprise his girlfriend, but a nervous Risa doesn't let him in, fearing that Nate-chan will see him. To make the situation more awkward, Hiroto hears someone in the shower and suspects that his girlfriend is cheating on him. But the very next minute he hears Nate-chan singing and immediately apologizes. He then gives Risa a kiss and departs. A little while later, Nate-chan comes out of the shower and inquires as to who is at the door. Risa doesn't want her to be hurt, so she fakes that it was a delivery boy. Regardless, Nate-chan knows the truth and tells her not to keep secrets from her best friend. Following this, she asks that Risa lend Hiroto to her for a day because she does not want to give up so easily. Risa is stunned to hear this, but she can't refuse her best friend, no matter how much she wants to. In the next scene, Risa and Nate-chan are on a dinner date with Hiroto. The three of them then go to a fancy restaurant, and Nate-chan appears to be very impressed with his cool attitude. Hiroto and Nate-chan discuss alcoholic beverages, and seeing them converse makes Risa very concerned. She also believes Nate-chan is more charming and mature than herself, which makes her insecure. After dinner, Nate-chan takes a business call, and when she is away, Risa asks Hiroto not to be so cool in front of her friend. Soon, Nate-chan returns and suggests that they go to a snooker hall. As they walk, Nate-chan tries to hold Hiroto's hand, but Risa quickly steps in between them. Upon arriving there, Nate-chan challenges Risa to a game. She mentions that the winner will get to kiss Hiroto. Risa is obviously against the idea, but at the same time, she doesn't want to back down from a challenge. So, with her boyfriend's permission, she starts playing. Unfortunately, after a tense encounter, she loses, and as per the condition, Hiroto has to kiss Nate-chan now. But at the last second, Risa stops them, claiming that she can't share Hiroto with anyone, not even her best friend. Seeing her best friend upset for the first time, Nate-chan decides to surrender and assures her that she won't interfere anymore. A few days later, Hiroto flies overseas for a business trip, leaving Risa alone. One day, she and Nate-chan go to the same restaurant where her classmate Yoshiki works. When they arrive, Yoshiki serves them a drink, and as they are conversing, Risa comes up with the idea of working part-time in order to distract herself from Hiroto. When she shares her idea, Yoshiki suggests she work with him in the same cafe. Nate-chan doesn't want her to work there because the cafe belongs to Akutsu. However, Risa decides to work because she wants to socialize and learn about the real world. The next day, Risa starts working at Akutsu's cafe with Yoshiki as her coworker. In the midst of all of it, she also receives a gift from Hiroto, which makes her very happy. One fine day, Nechan is at the cafe having a drink and admiring Risa's work. Just then, Akutsu approaches her and starts chatting. As they get comfortable, he reveals that he had feelings for Risa. After work, Risa is walking home alone when she notices someone following her. Scared, she calls Hiroto, but decides against telling him. She believes that now, as an adult, she should be able to handle these situations herself. However, Hiroto senses something is amiss and calls someone to look after her. In the meantime, Akutsu and Nechan are near the subway platform where they share a kiss. The next day after work, Risa is in the staff room when an unknown man approaches her. He appears to be the same person who followed her the day before. The man locks the door from inside and approaches Risa slowly, frightening the hell out of her. He then puts her on edge and confesses his feelings for her. Fortunately, before any damage is done, Hiroto breaks in and punishes the guy with an arm lock. At the same time, Yoshiki also walks in and asks Risa if she is all right. He then reveals that Hiroto had called him the night before, asking him to look after her. Following this, Hiroto brings her home and holds her in his arms. She apologizes to him for adding to his problems and for not acting like an adult. However, Hiroto calmly consoles her, and the two stand in the window, admiring the beautiful fireworks. Hiroto then expresses gratitude to her for coming into his life because he is now much more healed than before. The next day, the two of them start living together. Risa does not want to be ineffective, so she decides to help Hiroto in any way she can. Following this, he starts teaching her household chores, beginning with laundry. After finishing and cleaning, the two of them relax, with Risa on his lap. The next morning, Hiroto is about to leave for work when he gets a sudden headache. Risa notices this and puts him to bed. Later, Yuki arrives and takes his temperature, only to discover that he has a high fever. However, since he has to go to work, he tells Risa to look after Hiroto. Obliging to the request, she applies a fever-reducing patch on him and allows him to rest. A while later, Hiroto wakes up to get some water, but Risa is already at his service. Initially, he tells her to remain in the other room because he can handle it himself. However, Risa assures them that he can rely on her and decides to nurse him. Hiroto agrees, but only on the condition that she wears a mask. After a few days, he successfully recovers and heads to work. Later that evening on her way home, Risa is approached by a middle-aged woman named Sakura, who claims to be Hiroto's mother. Risa quickly invites her inside, and as they talk, she learns that Hiroto has a strained relationship with his mother. After a while, Sakura invites Risa to accompany her to a bar, to which she agrees. Surprisingly, the woman takes Risa to her adult bar and makes her hang out with a group of men. Shortly after, Risa walks outside and checks her phone, only to find multiple missed calls from Hiroto. She then calls him back but decides to conceal her exact location. However, Hiroto has already arrived there to pick her up. At first, he is angry about what she has done, but his anger quickly fades when he sees her cute, innocent face. As they are about to leave, Sakura approaches them, but Hiroto asks her to stay away from their lives. She agrees, but only on one condition. He will have to work as a host in her adult bar. Hiroto definitely wants her to be gone forever, so he accepts her condition. He then goes around the bar scouting customers, making a lot of money for his mother in just one day. After work, Hiroto and Risa decide to leave, but Sakura fakes illness. The two return to her, but Hiroto is aware of her shenanigans. Despite this, Risa realizes that his mother still loves him and wishes for him to return to her. So, she persuades Sakura to reveal her true feelings. After thinking for a while, the woman takes a serious tone and apologizes to her son for being an awful mother. She also asks Risa to look after Hiroto because she is leaving him in her care. Then the couple return home and share some emotional moments. Hiroto thanks her for taking responsibility and claims that she is the most precious girl in the world. In reply, Risa says that she will do everything she can to protect Hiroto. After this, the two of them share a loving hug, capping off the day happily. The next morning, Risa awakens to the sound of Hiroto speaking to someone at the door. It's Yuki. He asks for their permission to stay with them, which perplexes Risa. In the next scene, we see that Yuki is living with Hiroto and Risa. He appears to be good at everything, as he does all the housework and also looks after his boss. Seeing him, Risa starts feeling useless and believes that Yuki is more of a bride than herself. The next day, Hiroto goes on a business trip, leaving Yuki and his girlfriend at home. Later on, Risa also gets ready for her internship interview. When Yuki notices this, he offers to drive her to her destination, but she doesn't want to bother him and decides to go on her own. Despite this, Yuki accompanies her, and on the way, he saves her from some oncoming vehicles. However, he continues hugging her even after she is safe, leaving her puzzled. The next day, Risa receives a call from her internship company, informing her that she's been chosen. Excited, she prepares for her training and gets ready to leave. But just then, Yuki stops her. He then calls the said company to confirm the news. Surprisingly, the human resources manager claims that Risa has not been chosen. This reveals that Risa was probably duped by someone who wanted to bring Hiroto and his company down. In the meantime, Yuki coldly asks her to be more vigilant because Hiroto is being forced to do extra work because of her irresponsible behavior. He even comes closer to Risa and advises her to leave Hiroto so that he won't be distracted. However, Risa claims that she will not do so because they have planned their future together and that she cannot betray his trust in any way. After listening to her, Yuki praises her loyalty and informs her that she has passed the test. He then apologizes for his rude behavior and reveals that he was just testing her loyalty. Later that night, Hiroto returns from his business trip and learns that Risa is already asleep. After this, he speaks with Yuki and thanks him for protecting his girlfriend. The following day before leaving for work, Hiroto holds Risa in his arms and expresses his love for her. Unfortunately, the same day, as Risa is walking to her workplace, a guy abducts her and takes her to an abandoned location. The kidnapper then begins to touch Risa, but she can't do anything about it because her hands are tied. At the same time, Hiroto arrives at the scene to rescue her, but the kidnapper holds her at knife point, threatening to stab her. However, despite this, Hiroto risks his life and bravely thwarts the perpetrator. He then hugs her and apologizes for being late. Unfortunately, the romantic moment is cut short when the kidnapper strikes Hiroto in the head from behind, injuring him severely. The scene then cuts to Hiroto being treated at the hospital. He has survived, but has lost a lot of blood. Meanwhile, Risa is very disappointed in herself as she believes everything is her fault. Every time Hiroto gets in trouble because of her, it is actually ruining his life. So, she decides to do the one thing she never imagined. Risa departs from there, leaving behind a goodbye letter and her ring. Later, Hiroto regains consciousness and finds Risa's goodbye letter on the table. He is devastated to learn that she has abandoned him. In the next scene, we see Risa chatting with Nae-chan, who is aware of her best friend's breakup. Nae-chan advises her to go back to Hiroto because she will not find anyone better than him. However, Risa mentions that she wants Hiroto to be happy, and because of this, she can't be with him any longer. Hearing this, Nae-chan decides to do something on her own, so she goes to her new boyfriend Akutsu and asks him to take her to Hiroto. Upon meeting the latter, Nae-chan tells him to patch things up with Risa because neither of them are happy without each other. However, Hiroto refuses to do anything, claiming that he respects Risa's decision. Later, while walking through the streets, Risa comes across the coffee and vanilla shop, which reminds her of all the good times she had spent with Hiroto. Just then, Hiroto approaches her and tightly embraces her. Risa tries to walk away, but he does not let her leave, and instead brings her back to his place. He then kisses her and mentions that he will never let her leave. Risa is unable to hold back any longer, so she kisses him back. The next morning, she goes to the kitchen, only to discover several bottles of alcohol. After a while, she speaks with Yuki, who informs her that since she left, Hiroto's mind has been elsewhere, and he forgets a lot of things. According to Yuki, Hiroto is sleep-deprived and emotionally stressed, and he keeps running into walls. After learning about how much she means to him, Risa feels terrible about her decision. One day, Hiroto takes Risa to a special location where they can have a good time. There, she emotionally asks why he loves her, despite the fact she causes him so much trouble. Hiroto responds that he would rather face that trouble than be alone. Saying this, he gets down on one knee and proposes marriage to her. Risa is over the moon, and she accepts immediately. Later, Nae-chan and Yoshiki plan a celebration party at Yuki's organized location. Everyone has a good time, and at last, Hiroto kisses his love, Risa, in front of everyone. In the final scene, we see Hiroto and Risa, who are now married, having the coffee vanilla ice cream together.